All right, so thanks again for joining me, Dr. Rama. Very historic divestment for San Francisco State University. Can you introduce our listeners and your readers to yourself and how you're connected to the divestment campaign?
Sure. My name is Rama Ali Kased. I'm a professor in race and resistance department um, in the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University. I'm also part of the Faculty for Justice in Palestine on campus, in addition to my community work, where I'm involved with the Palestinian Feminist Collective and the U.S. Palestine Communities Network.
Awesome. I think my cousin Sarah Mahmoud, she's a part of the feminist collective as well. Uh,
Sada is a very old friend of mine. Yeah.
favorite favorite cousin.
Yeah.
Very inspirational person. So I wanted to get started by kind of if you know any of the history at San Francisco State when it comes to, because I know colleges across the country have been trying to do divestment campaigns. I'm in Chicago. I've seen Northwestern and University of Chicago and all these other, DePaul University, try to do things like that. What's the history of Palestinian organizing at San Francisco State?
Yeah. Well, I need to start with the history of the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State. It is the first college of ethnic studies in the nation, and one of only two colleges currently in the nation. The College of Ethnic Studies was brought about by students going on the longest student strike in our history, demanding an education that was relevant and responsive to primarily communities of color, working class communities, where students demanded an education that reflected them, in addition to an education that provided the space for students to explore skills and knowledges to help them and prepare them and facilitate them to get into the world and change the world for, challenge racial injustice, economic injustice, and social injustice. So that's the history of San Francisco State. In terms of organizing, Palestinian organizing, San Francisco State is the only U.S. university that still has a General Union of Palestinian Students, a chapter. The General Union of Palestinian Students, GUPS, has been around since the 1980s, where there were chapters across the world with hundreds of thousands of members. SF State is one of the only universities that still has a chapter of General Union of Palestinian Students. We are also a university that was one of the first universities to have a mural that was, and it was, came about through students, and a mural that's dedicated to Palestine. And if we look back to that history in the early 2000s, there was a lot of struggle around getting the mural up and what would be included in that mural. So there was a lot of struggle on campus to get that mural up. So that's a little bit of the context and the context of San Francisco State University.
How would you describe this victory came about? Um, Obviously, it probably wouldn't have come about if the start from that one mural, it goes probably way back then. Would you agree with that assessment? And how else would you assess it?
Absolutely. And I would go beyond and before that mural, right? Students have been the stewards of our Palestine liberation movement since we started for decades now in the US. They are our igniters of our movement. They carry forth our movement. So they're part and parcel of our movement for, since the 50s, since the first organization of Arab students was created on campus. So the campuses have a very long history. Now, when it comes to San Francisco State, it's a university that prides itself on student activism. It's a university that prides itself on social justice, right? Because of the history of San Francisco State University. So yeah, we are on the shoulders of many who came before us, who fought for equitable and relevant education and social justice and racial justice and liberation of all people. We're part of that legacy.
So how do you get the university to stick to its promise now? What is the next steps for organizers, faculty, students, people who care about this issue to make sure that they divest from those companies.
Yeah. Let me give you a little bit of how the encampment started at our university. Again, I want to reiterate that, you know, the organizing on our campuses and campuses across the nation, you know, that this movement didn't spring up with the encampments. Folks have been organizing on their campuses, students and faculty have been organizing on their campuses, you know, way before October, and again, for decades, right? But at San Francisco State, we were coming off the heels of students organizing themselves, including Palestinian students, because we saw a rise in tuition. We saw the cost of living and the urban cities across the nation, but specifically in San Francisco, going up, and college students struggling to be able to get to college, to be in college and survive and live healthy lives. So we were coming off of those types of organizing, always making the connections to U.S. imperialism, right? And these are the same students who were told, you know, a month, 2 months before October 7th, that their student loans couldn't be paid off, right? That wasn't going to happen. Or again, the rise of tuition, right? And you know, this is especially true for public institutions, but all institutions where we're seeing a decline of investment in our institutions, in our colleges, right? And we're telling students to work really hard, quote unquote, and get to college, but when they get there, they can't afford to do so, or there's an education that doesn't reflect their real life experiences, or an education that reflects the truth of what's happening in the world. So students were already organizing towards that at San Francisco State. And our encampment actually started later than a lot of the other encampments nationwide. We started in late April. And I don't know if you know this, Nader, but we were the first university to have public negotiations where students and administration did their negotiations in the quad right outside of the encampment. Their first meeting was public. The other interesting thing to know, or fact to know about the encampment is within hours of the encampment going up, students wanted to hold a democratic process and an election to ensure that the leadership of the encampment was representative of who was at the encampment, but that the streamline of communication was there, right? That there was a streamline of communication of what was happening in the encampment and what were the demands of an encampment into the administration. The other unique piece of San Francisco State, not to say it didn't exist in other universities, but I know what we were doing at SF State, is that the faculty, as soon as the encampment went up, tightly started organizing themselves and declaring that they were going to be the front line protecting our students, right? That it was our obligation and our duty as faculty who are serving these students, who are providing an education and a space of learning to also protect our students. So we made it clear from the beginning. We organized ourselves and said, we are the frontliners. We are going to protect our students. We're going to ensure that we're going to use the power that we hold as professors, as staff, to make sure that the dehumanization of students that was happening nationwide didn't happen at San Francisco State, that their demands were clear, that their voices were loud, and that they were heard. So we utilized our own power to do so by, we were part of advising and guiding students. We were talking to administration. We were, being the go-between between administration and students, again, with the goal of centering student voice and their power.
Why do you think that San Francisco State has made this move, yet universities across the country make it seem like divesting from companies like Lockheed Martin is, blasphemous, it's sacrilegious. They act as if it's, some big ordeal to take money out of these companies that, profit off of Palestinian death. Why, do you think that San Francisco State was able to do that, but not all these other universities?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question that I've been getting. I've been doing a lot of interviews and I'm getting that question, and I can't speak on what's happening at other universities. I'm not there or familiar and know the culture, right? And I'm sure, folks had a harder culture or more to counter or disrupt at their campuses than we did possibly, right? I don't know the answers because I think every campus is different, right? I teach organizing. That's my job. I teach students how to organize. I teach students to understand power people power and institutional power. And the one thing I always tell my students is understand that your time, place, and conditions are always different than other folks. Hence, every organizing model doesn't work. Every strategy doesn't work. Every tactic doesn't work for everyone, right? That we always have to assess our time, place, and conditions and our location, right? And for San Francisco State, again, we value student activism, right? We have an entire college that was built, and a very successful college that was built on the heels of the longest student strike. So we carried that forward. We knew where we were, and we were pushing that forward. I think that that's one. Two, again, I think San Francisco State has a long history of not only Palestinian students organizing themselves, but Palestinian students intentionally, again, this is happening at other campuses. I don't want to say it isn't, but San Francisco, that Palestinian students were building alongside other student organizations, interlinking their causes, interlinking their struggles, right? That it wasn't, imperialism is not just a Palestine issue, right? Genocide is not just a Palestine issue, right? That, we're all in this together, and that, we all deserve justice. And San Francisco State College of Ethnic Studies highlights that. That is exactly the mission of the College of Ethnic Studies, is to say liberation for all is our goal, right? So I want to say it's some of the culture, it's the embedded culture of San Francisco State. Not to say, that we have this easy life, because that's not true either, right? There is struggles and tensions throughout the way, but we utilize our history to push this campaign forward. Again, this is also a public institution that's been facing a lot of cuts and the rising tuition and the cost of living, and students have been organizing for years, making, again, those links between war and education, right? So we had a base. Students have been organizing themselves really tightly before and right before October 7th.
That was very well put. I want to leave with this one question, going back to basically holding the university to its promise. And I feel like you answered it, but I just want to get it clear. Is it because of that organizing that you described in your earlier answer? Is that how you guys expect to keep them to their word, because of the way the students have democratically decided who should be in these talks? That's how they're going to hold their feet to the fire?
Yes. And one big issue, sorry, I didn't answer that question. One big strategy of our campaigns and for the students' campaign was to develop wins. We're saying we don't declare this as a victory. There is no victory during an ongoing genocide, but this is a moment. We consider this a win. This is a moment to work with other institutions, work with other students, work with other faculty to say, divestment is not only morally imperative, but it's a feasible option. When we thought about our campaigns, and again, a lot of universities are thinking this, we thought about policies and wins that could be institutionalized. So for example, it's not just that we divested from the 4 major weapons manufacturing, again, 2 of them being Lockheed Martin and Caterpillar, but we also worked with the university to develop new investment policy, to amend the new investment policy statement that would then institutionalize moving forward investments that are that don't violate human rights based on international law, right? And the other ask, again, that our goal with that is to institutionalize this win, and that it's in writing and it's in policy, right? So it's not just this one-off, but that moving forward, the institution has a policy they must follow when they think about investments. The other piece we were able to win through the negotiations is a website that publishes their investments that measures side by side. We're still working out the details, but measures side by side with the investment policies and the investments to make sure that they're aligned, right? And that are published quarterly. Again, a new policy of the university moving forward. So we did think about the long term. It isn't just about the now, but coming up with wins that become institutionalized and part of the norm, and align with the values. And I think, a rich part of this is Faculty, we're part of this process, and they're going to be around. We want our students to graduate. We're going to miss them, but our students are going to eventually graduate, right? But the students are also focused on bringing in the new cohort of leaders, but the faculty are also intentionally holding on to this history moving forward.
Fantastic. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Rama, and appreciate you giving context to the divestment that was passed at San Francisco State University. Appreciate your time. Thank you.